The moment his spit landed on my cheek, I knew I no longer had a husband. I had a stranger wearing his face. It was supposed to be just another evening. The smell of roasted garlic still lingered in the kitchen. Our son's baby monitor crackled softly in the background, and the hum of the dishwasher filled the silence we didn't realize had grown between us. And then the front door slammed open. His brother, Marcus, stood there with that familiar glint in his eyes, the one he wore when he wanted to stir chaos. And my husband, Jason, didn't even ask. He didn't wait, didn't look into my eyes, the way he used to. One lie, that's all it took. One poisoned sentence from Marcus, and Jason believed it like it was gospel. He didn't ask me if it was true. He didn't let me speak. He shouted, he accused. And when I didn't react the way he wanted, when I refused to cry or beg or fall apart, he spat on me. I felt the heat of it more than the wetness. The betrayal seared deeper than any wound ever could. In that instant, something inside me broke, quietly, like glass under a silk cloth. No scream, no sobs. Just silence. I packed only what I needed. A small duffel bag, my journal, and my baby. Our son. Mine, for now. I left no note. No explanation. I didn't owe him that anymore. I disappeared. And for months I lived with the weight of my silence and the tiny heartbeat that gave me purpose. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the truth had a heartbeat too. That truth would grow, crawl, speak, and eventually stand tall enough for Jason to see. This isn't just a story of betrayal. This is the story of how I vanished, not out of fear, but to give truth a chance to grow strong enough to speak for itself. And when it did, even he couldn't deny it. Every morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone who had failed. Not because I had left, not because I was hiding, but because I had once believed Jason would protect me from everything, even his brother, especially his brother. Marcus had always been a snake in expensive cologne, the kind of man who smiled too wide and touched your arm a second too long. Jason knew how I felt about him. He knew I never trusted Marcus, but blood is thicker than truth, apparently. That's something I learned the hard way. The lie was simple. Marcus claimed he saw me with another man, that I'd been sneaking around for weeks. No proof, no photos, just his word. And Jason, who used to swear he could read my soul through my eyes, didn't even blink before believing him. I remember Jason pacing, fists clenched, jaw locked. He didn't ask if it was true. He asked why. As if he already knew. As if I'd done something unspeakable. The house I had made a home was suddenly a courtroom, and I was on trial with no defense. The spit was just the final gavel. But Jason wasn't always like that. He used to bring me tea when I worked late. He once wrote a song for me, clumsily strummed on a secondhand guitar. He had laughed nervously when he played it, afraid I wouldn't like it. I had cried, holding his face in my hands, thinking I had found the kind of love people wrote about. Where did that man go? I guess the answer was sitting across from me at my kitchen table for years, slowly being reshaped by resentment and Marcus's poison. Now, it was just me and Eli, our son. He was only 8 months old when we left. I can still feel the tremble of my arms as I carried him out into the night. He slept against my chest, breathing like a whisper, completely unaware that his life had just split in two. My sister Clara took us in. She was the only person I could call. Clara had always been the firebrand of the family. Where I was quiet and careful, she was loud, impulsive, and unfiltered. She never liked Jason. Thought he was too pretty, too charming, too easily swayed. She said his love felt conditional, like he was always waiting for a reason to pull it away. I hated how right she turned out to be. "You don't owe him an explanation," she said one night as we sat on her tiny couch, Eli curled up between us. "You owe yourself peace. Peace." That word used to sound like a luxury. Now it felt like survival. But even in Clara's apartment, safe, anonymous, tucked away, I wasn't really free. I kept checking my phone, waiting to see his name. Not because I missed him, but because I was scared of what silence might mean. Would he come looking for us? Would he care? Or had I been erased already, replaced in his heart with anger and Marcus's lies? Sometimes I dreamed that Jason would come to his senses, that he'd show up at Clara's door with tears and apologies, and that old clumsy guitar. But other nights, darker ones, I dreamed he'd show up with custody papers and Marcus smirking behind him. I didn't know what was worse. I tried to make a life again. Clara helped me find a part-time job at a bookstore. The owner, May, was kind. Little too curious about why I had no wedding ring and kept flinching when people raised their voices. But she gave me hours and didn't ask too many questions. Eli learned to crawl on the carpet of that bookstore, just behind the poetry section. I used to sit in the break room during lunch, nursing him while reading Audre Lorde or Maya Angelou, trying to stitch together the pieces of myself. Trying to remember that I was still whole, even after being broken. But at night, the doubts came. What if I'm wrong? What if he really thought I cheated? Could I blame him for reacting like that? Was there a part of me that failed as a wife, a partner, a woman? My therapist, because yes, Clara eventually dragged me to one, called it internalized guilt, the way I carried responsibility for his cruelty. She said trauma makes you apologize for the things others did to you. I nodded like I understood, but part of me still wondered if I deserved it. And then there was the box. It came on a Tuesday. No return address. Just my name, maiden name, scribbled in sharp, angry ink. Inside, one of Eli's old pacifiers, a copy of our marriage certificate, and a folded note that said, "He's not mine, is he?" That's when I knew it wasn't over. The box sat on Clara's kitchen table like a landmine. I stared at it for a long time before picking up the note again. He's not mine, is he? No greeting, no signature. But I didn't need one. I knew Jason's handwriting. He always pressed too hard with a pen, his words etched into the paper like scars. I folded the note and set it down beside the pacifier. My heart pounded in my throat, that horrible old rhythm of fear and disbelief. Not just at the accusation, but at the fact that he could question the one thing he should have been sure about, his son. Eli stirred in the bedroom, and I went to him, because what else could I do? Holding him was the only way I could keep from falling apart. His little hand grasped my shirt, and I whispered, "You don't deserve any of this." Later that night, Clara came home and found me still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with the note in my hand. She read it, her jaw tightening. "He has the nerve to send this?" I nodded. "He thinks Eli isn't his. He's doubling." "Down," she said, pacing. "He lost control of you, so now he's going after Eli. This isn't about paternity, it's about punishment." She wasn't wrong. Jason had always needed things to make sense, to be black and white. If I left, if I was right to leave, then he had to be wrong, and I don't think he could live with that. So he needed a justification. If Eli wasn't his, then his rage was righteous. The betrayal wasn't his, it was mine. I didn't respond to the note. I didn't need to. But a week later, a letter came from a lawyer. Jason wanted a paternity test. It was the moment I'd been dreading, and strangely, the one I hoped for. Because now, finally, the truth would have to stand on its own. No more screaming matches. No more he said heard from his brother. Just DNA and facts. But the truth, even when it's on your side, doesn't always protect you from pain. The court ordered us to meet at a private clinic halfway between our towns. Clara came with me. I sat in the waiting room, trying not to look at Jason. He was 10 feet away, but it felt like a mile. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were darker, hollower than I remembered. When they landed on Eli, sleeping against my chest, something flickered in them. Regret? Longing? Or just anger? He didn't speak to me. Not even a nod. Just sat there like I was a stranger with something that used to belong to him. The nurse called us in. The swabs were quick, clinical, clean. I kissed Eli's forehead after they took his sample and whispered, "Soon." We left without a word. The waiting nearly broke me. The lawyer said results could take up to 2 weeks. 2 weeks of pacing Clara's apartment. 2 weeks of nightmares. 2 weeks of wondering what would come next. During that time, Clara and I had our first real fight. "I don't want him in Eli's life," she said one night, voice hard. "Even if the test proves he's the father, he doesn't deserve him." "He's still his dad," I said softly. "Not a good one." "Maybe not, but Eli might want to know him. Someday." "What do I say when he asks?" "You say his father gave up the right to be called one." I looked at her, feeling the heat rise behind my eyes. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is," she snapped. "You're trying to build bridges over a river that tried to drown you." The room fell. Quiet. We stood there, two women with the same blood but completely different thresholds for forgiveness. I want to be better than what happened to me," I said. Clara looked at me then, softer. "You already are." When the email came, with the test results, my hands shook too much to open it. Clara read it aloud. Probability of paternity, 99.9999%. Jason was Eli's father. No debate, no uncertainty. Scientific proof that everything I said had been true. I waited for something to change inside me, some switch to flip. I thought maybe I'd feel vindicated, powerful, but all I felt was tired. The next day, Jason called. It was the first time I'd heard his voice in almost 3 months. "Hi," he said, and that single syllable hit like a brick. Not angry, not aggressive, just hollow. "I got the results," he continued. I said nothing. I was wrong. Still, I stayed silent. I need to see him," he said, voice cracking. "Please." I hung up. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I didn't know what to do with the sound of his remorse. It was too late for sorry and too soon for forgiveness. As if summoned by chaos, Marcus showed up 2 days later. He found me at the bookstore. I was in the back, reading to Eli during my lunch break, when I heard the voice I thought I'd never have to hear again. "Wow," Marcus said, leaning against the doorframe. "Didn't think you had it in you, to just disappear like that." I froze. "Don't worry," he said. "I'm not here to start anything. Just wanted to say, you really screwed my brother up." I stood slowly, placing Eli behind me. "Get out," he smiled, that sick, smug twist of a mouth. "I always knew you were trouble. Jason thought you were pure. He needed to learn." "You lied," I said, shaking. "Why? What did I ever do to you?" He shrugged. "You got in the way. Of me and Jason. Of the way things were." "You mean you couldn't manipulate him when I was around?" He didn't answer, just gave a wink. "Guess we all lie sometimes." I called Clara. By the time she got there, he was gone. But the damage was done. I realized then, Marcus never needed a reason. He lied because he could. Because he enjoyed watching things burn. A few days later, Jason asked to meet again. I agreed, at a park during the day, with people around. He looked different this time. Tired, haunted, no longer the man who had spat at me, but not yet the man I once loved either. "I don't know who I was," he said. I believed him, and I hated myself for it even while it was happening." "Why?" I asked. "Why did you believe him?" He hesitated. "Because part of me has always believed I'm not enough, that you'd realize it and leave. And Marcus, he feeds off that." I shook my head. "You let your fear become a weapon. Against me, against your own child." "I know," he whispered. There it was, the admission, the self-awareness. Too late. He looked at Eli playing in the grass. "I want to be in his life. I want to try." I looked at him, really looked, and saw the pain, the regret, and the fragility. He could break or rebuild. I wasn't sure which. I'm not saying no, I said finally, but it won't be on your terms. You see him when I say, where I say. And if you ever let Marcus near him again, it's over. He nodded. I'll take whatever I can get. That night, I sat with Eli by the window, watching the stars. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was hiding. I felt like I was deciding what kind of mother I wanted to be, what kind of woman, and maybe eventually what kind of peace I could offer, not for Jason, but for myself. Because forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't something you gave someone else. It was something you gave yourself, to finally breathe again. It was raining the day Jason showed up unannounced at the bookstore. May called from the front. "You've got a visitor." Her voice was cautious, like she knew something was off. I stepped out from the back, and there he was, soaked through, eyes bloodshot, holding a folded envelope in one hand like it weighed 100 pounds. "I shouldn't be here," he said quickly, voice shaking. "But I have something, and you need to see it." My first instinct was to tell him to leave, to walk away and not bring the storm inside. But something about the way he looked, like he was unraveling, made me stop. He handed me the envelope. "It's Marcus. Everything." I hesitated, then took it. Inside were screenshots of text messages, emails, even a voice memo. Jason had gone through Marcus's phone. What he found was worse than I imagined: manipulation, lies, proof that Marcus had planned to turn Jason against me. He'd even sent messages to Jason from a burner number, pretending to be the man I was supposedly cheating with. Jason's voice cracked. "I found it after I started therapy. I started looking at the past with different eyes. I thought maybe I could make it right." "You should have looked sooner," I said, the weight of every sleepless night pressing against my ribs. "I know," he whispered. "I was too proud, too scared." He stepped closer. "But there's one more thing. Marcus, he threatened to go for custody. Said he'd back me if I fought you. Said we could raise Eli without you." I felt the world tilt. "You considered it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He dropped his gaze. "For a moment, then I remembered who you are, and who he is." Tears blurred my vision. "You were going to take him from me." "I wasn't," he said. "I swear I wasn't. But it scared me how close I came to letting someone else think for me again." My heart ached, because this was the choice. Not whether to forgive him, but whether to let him back into my son's life, knowing now just how deep the damage went, knowing the kind of men Eli would be shaped by. "You don't get to decide." "Who raises my son?" I said. "Not anymore. That power's gone." "I understand," he said, and for once, I believed he did. "I'll never let Marcus near him. You hear me?" Jason nodded. "I'm cutting him off. For good." And maybe that was the most honest thing he'd ever said. Inside, I felt something break, but not in the way it had before. Not pain. Not despair, relief. Not because everything was okay, but because I was. Later that night, after I put Eli to sleep, I sat by the window again, rain tapping the glass like an old song. My phone buzzed, a message from Jason, just one line. "Thank you for protecting him, even from me." I stared at it for a long time before typing back, "Be better." For him. Not for me. I wasn't doing this for us anymore. This was for Eli. Because the truth had a heartbeat. And now, it had a future. 2 months. Passed. The rain stopped, the air warmed. Spring came quietly, like forgiveness. Not loud or grand, but soft and slow and real. Jason stayed away, just like I asked. He sent letters, 1 a week, never asking for more than updates about Eli. Sometimes he included drawings he made for him or stories he used to tell when Eli was still too small to understand. I didn't respond to most of them, but I read every word. He was trying. And though that didn't erase what happened, it mattered that he no longer expected redemption as his right, but saw it as a privilege he had to earn every single day. Eli was walking now. Wobbly steps at first, then more confident ones. Clara cried the first time he stumbled toward her with sticky hands and a gummy grin. "That's my boy," she shouted, lifting him into the air like a trophy. She had become more than a sister. She was Eli's other parent, the one who stayed, the one who caught me when I fell. We never talked about Jason anymore, not directly, but one night over, "Tea," she said. "You look lighter." I smiled. "I feel it." We sat in silence for a while. Then she added, "You know, you were always the strong one, even when you didn't know it." Maybe I finally believed her. One Sunday, I met Jason at the park again. This time, it was my idea. He brought a blanket and juice boxes and an old toy car Eli used to love. When Eli saw him, he didn't hesitate. He waddled forward, arms wide, and Jason knelt to catch him with tears in his eyes. I watched from a bench, arms crossed, not cold, just cautious. Jason looked up and nodded. I nodded back. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was something. Later, as Eli napped in his stroller, Jason sat beside me. "I want to do this right," he said. "Not for you, for him." "I know," I replied. He looked at me, eyes softer than I remembered. "And you? Are you okay?" I thought about it. "I'm not the woman I was," I said slowly. "She died the night you stopped seeing me, but this one, the one who walked away, she's learning to live." He nodded. "She's incredible." I didn't say thank you. I didn't need to. Back at Clara's that evening, I stood at the window with Eli in my arms, his breath warm against my neck. Below us, life moved on, cars passing, lights flickering on in windows, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. I thought about everything. I had lost, everything I had gained. Pain doesn't vanish, it echoes, but it also teaches. It shows you what you're made of when everything else falls apart. I was no longer the woman who waited to be chosen. I was the woman who chose peace over chaos, truth over comfort, my son over a fantasy. And in choosing, I found myself again. It's strange how peace arrives, not with a parade, but in small, ordinary moments, like watching Eli chase bubbles in the backyard of our new apartment, giggling as each one pops on his chubby fingers. Like sipping tea on the porch while Clara reads beside me in the fading light. Like waking up and realizing I don't feel afraid anymore. We built a new life. Not perfect, not painless, but ours. And every day, I get to choose it again. Jason. Visits twice a month now. Supervised at first, now in the open. Eli knows him as someone who brings stories and silly songs, not someone who once broke me. Maybe that's the greatest gift I can give my son. The chance to know his father without inheriting our pain. As for me, I stopped trying to rebuild the woman I used to be. Instead, I'm becoming someone else entirely. Someone who knows her worth. Someone who doesn't wait to be saved. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe love will find me again. Maybe it won't. But I'm no longer holding space for someone else to complete me. I am already whole. And when Eli looks up at me with those bright eyes, when he says "mama," like it's the only word that matters, I know. I didn't vanish. I rose.